So a bit of my background about how I got into coaching.
Yeah.
I worked in the corporate world for about 20 plus years, selling high-end technology solutions to large corporates and medium enterprise businesses. And, I found throughout that experience, really to be an effective salesperson, I had a team of people reporting to me at one point. Really to be an effective salesperson was really about relationships. It was not so much about, it had to be a good solution, had to be a good price and all that sort of stuff. But what really made the difference was the type of relationship you had. And what I discovered was the most successful way of developing relationships was just being myself. Being authentic, being real, being open and honest with people. That seemed to be a much more effective way of creating powerful relationships in business that really made a difference to the results. And so, in coaching teams that reported to me, for me it was like, how were they operating? What was their behaviour like? Were they being genuine and authentic with people? Or were they trying to tell a story or con people or take them down the garden path? And so I think that's where I really got my first taste of, coaching people in how to behave, being genuine and authentic with people. I moved on from that business into a sales training business. And again, it was just an extension of that. So, working with individuals from different types of sales organisations and really seeing a very common theme, which was are they behaving in a natural, authentic way? Are they really expressing themselves, or are they pretending to be someone else, or behaving in a way that they think they should be behaving? So from there I started working in a executive coaching business. I wanted to, expand my reach from just the sales environment into the entrepreneurial space, into the management space and the leadership space. So I took up a role with an established business in coaching. Really enjoyed my time there. Was quite successful in producing some really amazing results, or working with people who produce the amazing results, and me facilitating that. And then I had the opportunity, saw the being profile come about, and I'd done some work in what's generally known as ontology, which is the science or philosophy of being. And I realised that there was a real correlation between a lot of the work that I had been doing and this new opportunity. So these days I do coaching. I do leadership and performance coaching with individuals, typically those in the medium enterprise space, or entrepreneurs, or some people with small businesses. I use the being profile to initially assess where they're at, and of course this all relates to my past experience in relationships. I also happen to run a travel and media business as well, because I love travel. I love going overseas. I have a specific passion for the South Pacific, and interestingly enough, that's all the work that I've done in that space really sort of ties well into that business. Working with different people from different nationalities and developing those relationships. Because I think for me the most important thing in business is relationships. And if you're not being authentic, if you're not speaking up, if you're not being really self-expressed with what's going on for you, and being straight with people, then you can waste a lot of time and a lot of energy. One of the first times that I worked with the being profile with a particular individual who I'd only actually known for a short period of time, and this particular individual who's become a good friend since then. I was kind of at a point in his life where he'd gone through a really difficult time. He'd had a serious injury. He'd had to reevaluate where he was at in his life with his career. He'd been working as a vet up until that point. And, one of the things, where I really got that this was something completely different was, in one conversation, he was able to really look at where he wanted to take his life. He was at a real crossroads, and we spoke a bit about who was he authentically, what was really present for him, what was really important to him, and I think what came up for him was his natural ways of being, the ways of being that we identified through the profile, where he had a lot of strengths, and by exploring those areas, and specifically looking at his authenticity. What was really, and that's one of the key, I guess, scores in the being profile. Looking at his authenticity, we were really able to dig into something that was he was really passionate about, and I could just see his way of being. Like and when I say that, I mean like he came alive. You could see his aliveness and his passion suddenly come to the fore when he started to talk about what he was really interested in, and he's gone on to start to develop a wellness centre for people who are transitioning from injury into something new for themselves. So it was like, that was one of the first profiles I did, and I really was, I'd worked with other profiles in the past, and I just, I was kind of dumbfounded and amazed that we were able to accomplish that in one conversation, over a 90-minute period. So really quite extraordinary. So, if there was any one thing that really kind of, and I mentioned it before, but really highlighted or really made the difference, was just the conversation about authenticity. The real, what is it to be authentic? What is it to, what does that actually mean? And, exploring that particular score, because he actually had a fairly strong score in that area. And so, having the conversation and just getting him to start to explore what was really there for him, inside his being, that was really authentic for him. I think that was the real key. There was probably also, there was another score, I think the commitment to something bigger than oneself. That score was also quite high, and he also had a fairly strong vulnerability driver. So, he was very open, he was very honest, he was willing to make that. So I kind of knew I could go places with him in this conversation, and I knew that he was really committed to something bigger than his own circumstances. So I think a combination of those things were the key areas that we were able to focus on to really dig into what was what his passion was, what his life's purpose, or what really gave him meaning. I think that it really does work to focus on people's strengths, because they are naturally going to be positive. So, it's a really good way to introduce people to the being profile, to talk about the positive side of that profile. And I think then, in ongoing coaching with him, we were able to look at some of those other scores where maybe he didn't have so many strengths, where he maybe had some weaknesses I wouldn't really call them weaknesses so much as he really hadn't distinguished fully for himself how those ways of being were impacting his circumstances and his general behaviour and actions. So as we did ongoing coaching, we looked at some of those other areas. I think, interestingly enough, one of the areas for him that was a little low was integrity. And really for him, what does integrity mean? And really being able to distinguish integrity and what it meant from an ontological point of view, he was then able to see why certain things weren't working in his life. Because we distinguish integrity as things being whole and complete and doing what works. It was something that he really wasn't paying much attention to because he just didn't have the awareness of it. So, yeah, certainly, highlighting people's strengths and then using some of the other scores where they might, have a lack of knowledge or a lack of distinction in being able to see the impact of those behaviours on their circumstances and what they're out to accomplish, really makes the being profile like an amazing tool to quickly uncover and quickly distinguish those things for individuals, who are up to something. How do I describe the being profile, or what is being? I often distinguish it in terms of behaviour. I think sometimes with people, I think, well, about behaviour, right? You've got certain behaviours. Sometimes you do things that you don't understand why you do them, and then sometimes your behaviour you can make sense of. And I'd like to just cut that word in half and look at the be and the have. So if you look at your behaviour, you could look at it almost as like the being is the be part. So the front. So generally your behaviour is driven by who are you being. And that kind of sits sometimes below the surface. So generally, if you look at your behaviour, I can distinguish for people that, it's largely your ways of being that actually then drive your behaviour. And there are certain other factors that come into that, like your past and your experiences and, but it's the great thing about all of that is it's all highlighted in the profile itself, from the drivers through the impact scores, the ways of being that are all in there, the primary and secondary ways of being, through looking at all of those different ways of being, it's pretty easy to start to articulate and for people to understand what drives their behaviour. We all know that people have behaviour, and sometimes their behaviour is completely inconsistent with, who they say they are inside a business or what they're up to, and then it's like, well, what's going on with that? Don't you ever wonder about, that person's behaviour? Well, I can tell you what's sitting beneath that, what's driving that behaviour. And if you look at the word behaviour, well, it's got the word be in it. So it's pretty straightforward. And then there's also the be do have and the have do be model, which also is, if you look at that, if who you're being, drives what you do and drives what you have. And so it kind of it can all tie together. It's a much longer conversation than we have time for here. But I love being able to tie all those things together, and it gives people real clarity on, wow, so that's why I do the things that I do. It's like, well, great, so wouldn't you like to actually be able to impact that? Wouldn't you like to be able to shift some of your behaviour? And I can show you a really easy way of being able to find out what's sitting beneath that. Being able to draw those connections between, the being and what's actually going on in people's lives and the results that they're producing. There's a guy that I've been working with for the last few months, and he's had a reasonably successful business, and he's brought out a new product inside his business, and he was really looking to take that to the next level. And again, he had an integrity score which was one of his lowest scores, and in asking him some questions about what his experience of himself was in terms of his own confidence and his belief in his ability to produce the results around the development of that particular product, which I could see was like a real winner. Like I was like, wow, this is just going to take the market by storm. There was a lot of self-doubt going on. There was a lot of concern about not being able to provide for his family. And what came out of all of that was, as a younger man, he'd never completed university. So he had this kind of story in the background where, it was something that he hadn't completed. And in terms of, the integrity score, I could see that there was this, in his whole being and being a whole and complete human being, there was this big piece that was missing. He had this, regret and a level of guilt and shame around not having completed that university degree. And, when I pointed that out to him, he was kind of shocked because he could see that, as we started to run through what he actually had accomplished in his life, he could see that, in fact, he'd done an amazing job, and yet somewhere in the background was a conversation that he was having with himself about, not being whole and complete. And I think as a result, then, if I looked at his overall behaviour, he would, start to read books and not complete them. He would start projects and not complete them. He would make promises to people and not, fulfil on them. And, all of this was kind of being driven by this sense of this incomplete piece in his life around integrity, like being a whole and complete human being. So, look, and as a result of some of that stuff, he's just gotten agreement from the board of an investor to receive sizable investment in this startup business, which is part of his overall business. So I'm super excited for him. He's super excited, and it was just really, in the integrity piece, it was really about him getting that he was whole and complete as a way of being, And we got there by, different practices, like, okay, well, read some books and complete. And I think he's actually read like 20 books since we started coaching, So just the ability of the profile to be able to highlight these areas. And look, and it takes a certain level of skill to be able to uncover and coax this information out of individuals. But I think the profile itself really provides, experienced coaches with an opportunity to be able to ask some hard questions and get to the heart of what might be driving that particular behaviour. Yeah, and I'm so excited for him. I did have a conversation with him just before he went into that pitch. Just to I said, it was a conversation to have him be whole and complete. Is there anything, like a clearing conversation, I guess we could call it, and just to have him say, was there any concerns, any doubts, anything that was going on for him? And all I could hear at the other end of the phone was someone who was, really confident, really powerful, really believed in what he was delivering, and none of that stuff that was all based in something that happened in the past, which he'd been carrying with him, through and was driving so much of his behaviour. I was really excited for him. So, there's different ways of being in the profile, and then there's also the drivers. And the drivers really kind of tell me, what's kind of the foundation or the baseline that might be sitting under the surface of all of these ways of being. So each of the drivers will in itself impact those ways of being, and the ways of being kind of have a reflected view of the drivers. So I think if I was to talk about the same individual, so there's an individual that I've been coaching who had an opportunity to pitch, to a board for quite a large investment inside his business, and one of his key drivers was anxiety. So through conversation with him, I could start to see that his anxiety was brought about by his concerns for things from the past. So not being able to provide for his family, not being able to provide for his business partners. And so he would start to, this anxiety would flare up or become present whenever he had, a difficult situation to pitch or to overcome. So, I think, in that respect, it was, to be able to say to him, look, you are someone that does this. You can tend to catastrophize. You can tend to take things that you think might happen in the future and make them real. And that is going to then impact your behaviour, specifically in the area of your integrity. Because you start to, the anxiety starts to feed into, maybe being really nice with people, being a real people pleaser, rather than being straight with people, When we talked about the sales environment before, one of the things that I've certainly experienced in my years of sales is that, being straight, open and honest with people is way more effective than being nice and keeping people happy. So I shared that with him. I said, look, you're in a sales role. You're selling your ideas and your vision to someone else. So, you really want to be straight with people, tell them how you're feeling, be open and honest with them, rather than just making them happy. And I think, that anxiety driver, when I see it at that level, I think he was a 6 out of 10 in anxiety, which means, he certainly prone, to having anxiety drive certain behaviours. He was able to then distinguish that for himself and push beyond that and start to take those actions where he was being straight, honest, and no longer really, it was no longer the case that keeping someone else happy was more important than the development of his business.
Yeah.
When you had to put it like that to someone, look, do you want to keep them happy or do you want them to invest? You choose, because you can't have both. So and the great thing about this individual as well was, he also has a very high vulnerability score. So again, that told me that, he had the propensity or the desire or the willingness to be open, honest and truthful. So it was really, again, just laying this out in front of him, giving him, I guess, the awareness of how he was operating, some of the dynamics in play, and what was the reason for some of those dynamics, particularly past-based experiences, that he was able to see clearly and make choices based on this new set of information and knowledge that he had about why he was behaving the way he was behaving. In terms of using the being profile in more of a team environment, whilst we haven't got to a point with a particular person I'm coaching where we've done the profiles of those individuals in his team, the awareness now of the ways of being and how he's been able to see for himself how it's impacted his behaviour and his results, he can really start to now correlate that with the individuals in his team. So I am about to undergo coaching and the being profile with some of his frontline team. But he can really see now that it's not their personality. It's not like they're a bad person. It's not like any of that. That what's underlying all of this is the different ways of being and specifically things like responsibility. In leadership roles, that the way of being and being responsible, and how we distinguish it in the being profile, around taking ownership as opposed to being something trying to take control or push people around, or about ownership, and then you mix that in with other measures of the profile which talk to effective communication. So he's already started to see that maybe some of the ways he communicates, how he's taking responsibility for his business, taking ownership rather than blaming, is way more effective in actually getting these people on board. So look, it's still early, but he's definitely seen the opportunity to work with his team, have the being profile done with all that team, have them coached. He can really see huge opportunity in transforming the communication that happens in the leadership team, the type of results that they can produce. So he's super excited about that. We've actually got a conversation about that on Friday. So looking forward to that. Yeah, sometimes it's very hard to identify what's driving someone's behaviour, and it can often be hidden from the view of the individual who's behaving in that particular way. I've spent a lot of time in sales, and I can say that in my earlier years, some of my behaviour was completely inauthentic. I was doing things because I thought that's what they wanted me to do, and of course the results of that weren't ideal. If I had had access to something like the being profile and a coach to sit me down and explain to me, what does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be in communication? What does it mean to have integrity? What are those things? It would have solved so many problems that I went through personally. And I think what drives a lot of my purpose and mission now is that the difficult times I've faced in my life, in business, in my personal life, and all sorts of areas. My goodness me, if there was a being profile around, in those days, it would have just highlighted straight away what was in the way of me really performing or really sort of taking the next step, rather than being, chastised or put down and being disciplined for what was apparently bad behaviour, where I was going, well, hang on, what are you talking about? That's exactly what you told me to do. So I think the opportunity to really open up effective communication, honest, straight communication amongst teams, really develops trust. And in my experience, the more a team trusts one another, if I can count on my team, if I know they've got my back, then the sky's the limit. But when trust is not there, when people are not communicating effectively, and the being profile is an amazing tool for really looking at different ways of communication, and there's a whole host of different scores that indicate how people might be operating in their communication with people. And blame is one of those things where blame doesn't work. It's the carrot and the stick thing, right? So I think there's an amazing opportunity for businesses to really create effective communication and amazing trust in teams, which can take performance to a whole new level, rather than doing it the traditional way of, like you were talking about, that's just a bad employee, or there's something wrong with him, we need to fix that. They're kind of the more traditional ways of teams operating, certainly in my corporate world experience, and it just doesn't work. It just is not effective at the end of the day. And I think the being profile opens up a whole new world of conversations and distinctions and ways of looking at things for people, which gives them like really hands-on access to being able to transform relationships and the effectiveness of teams in a relatively short period of time that just haven't been available in the past. So the being profile offers something that just there's nothing else out there like it. It's really cool. Who's ready for the being profile? Well, I could say pretty much anyone, although I guess for me personally, in terms of who do I want to impact, who do I want to make a difference to, who would be the ideal person for the being profile. First of all, I think it's someone who's both open-minded and open-hearted. And what I mean by that is that there's a willingness there to change, to do something differently. And typically what that would then indicate is that it's someone who's up to something. So someone who's has a goal, has a mission, has a purpose. And for me personally, that's usually something that's a contribution to someone other than just themselves. So it's people who are up to stuff. So who's ready to do the being profile? Well, yeah, look, pretty much anyone. Again, those people that are going to get the most benefit from it, those people who actually want to go somewhere. If it's someone who's quite content in, hanging by the beach and enjoying the sunshine, then great. Look, it's going to make a difference to them, and maybe they'll be more effective at hanging at the beach and enjoying the sunshine. But for those people, I think, specifically, I think the entrepreneurial space, people who who've got a lot of passion, who are generally very, heart-centred and heart-driven, really want to contribute something, and they're frustrated. They're just like, I've got so much to get. And this is my experience of myself sometimes, right? So I'm probably the ideal candidate as well. But look, really want to make a difference, really want to have an impact on the planet, really want to transform a business or a society or a community, and are frustrated by what's in the way of them really delivering on what their life's purpose, their mission is. I think those individuals would get immediate and enormous benefit from the being profile, because it's just going to point out and highlight to them in a very short period of time what is actually frustrating them. And from there, we can create actions and opportunities and practices and homework and all that stuff to start to transform that. But by being able to get that DNA in a way that's so much at the core of how people operate and behave, I think, I think it's just an amazing opportunity. If you're someone who's up to something, you're feeling a little frustrated or stuck or not getting the results that you want, I think the opportunity to do a being profile is just going to, launch you into the next stage of your life's purpose, mission, goal, whatever it might be. So is there anything that I'd really want to share with the world? And, I guess it's inside of the context of the being profile and the conversation we're having today. I really believe that everyone's got a purpose and a mission and something to fulfill on. And I've had the personal experience of being stopped dead in my tracks and giving up, and hitting the bottom of the barrel, and thinking that there's no more possibility, that that's it, I'm not going to fulfill on my mission. And where I am right now in my own life tells me that that's not the case, that anything's possible for any individual. So if you've had a dream, don't give up on it. There was a motto I had some years ago when I started a different coaching business, and it was don't stop believing, never give up. You really can accomplish whatever your dream, mission, purpose is in life. And the opportunity that the being profile, I think, represents, and why I'm working with it, why I'm using that as a tool, is because I've not found any other way of getting to that conversation, even with individuals who have given up, and really reigniting people's passion for what they're out to accomplish in their lives. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to do the being profile, if you want to reignite your passion, your dreams, if you want to take your dreams, your passion, your goal to the next level, then the being profile is absolutely the most amazing tool that I've come across to be able to start that fire up again, or to stoke the fire with a few more logs of wood. So yeah, it's really a privilege and an amazing opportunity to be working with this profile. I'm incredibly grateful that I've been given this by a power greater than me, and really excited about what the future holds, not just for this community, but for the global community, because this is an amazing tool. It's more than a tool, really. It's like a complete tool set, and really excited about where it's heading, and really grateful for my opportunity to be part of that.